I think, I mean, this is my opinion. I think they did it because they think they can compete in 2025 and they want to find a quarterback. Otherwise, why spread the money out, right?
Yeah, I don't understand that either. I don't like void years. I don't like kicking the can down the road. I'm generally philosophically against it because I think it usually goes against it. For example, there are extreme cases like the Eagles that are competing for championships and they are winning championships with void years and stuff. But it's an extreme case. The Jets are starting a rebuild now. It's year zero of the rebuild. So I think it would make more sense to I just had to your point, eat everything now to have a clean slate next year.
Today, I'm interviewing Wendell Ferriera of A to Z Sports. Wendell covers the Packers and the entire AFC East as a whole. He's got a lot of interesting opinions about the Jets, what they did with Rodgers, and how they're moving forward with the NFL draft. Let's get into it. Wendell, thanks for joining us today. I really appreciate it.
Appreciate it, Pat. Let's go.
All right. So give us, everybody watching, an idea of who you are, how you came into working for A to Z Sports, and, what your relationship is with the AFC East.
Yeah, I actually live in Brazil, which is kind of weird since that I'm covering the American version of football. But I started covering the NFL here in Brazil 10, 15 years ago. Then 2-3 years ago, I moved to covering in English and to start writing for the American market. I started covering the Packers actually, and I write about the Packers for A to Z Sports too. But for the last a year or maybe a little less than a year, I've been an editor for A to Z Sports for the AFC East, so obviously much closer to the Jets and to the other AFC East teams too.
Okay, so as a Packers writer, what was your reaction to the Jets not keeping Aaron Rodgers? Did you agree with it? Did you not agree with it? What was your opinion on the whole situation?
I kind of would have understood both ways because Aaron Rodgers is still playing at a decent level. Obviously, he's not in his prime anymore, like he did with when he was on the Packers. But at the same time, he could have still been a viable bridge quarterback for the Jets. He will be 41 by the start of next season. So yeah, I understand the idea of the Jets moving on from him, but at the same time, I kind of want to see what the plan will be for the Jets moving forward, because I think having a bridge quarterback in place when a new quarterback comes, especially because this draft class is not strong for the quarterback position. So I think having a bridge quarterback in place would have been important. And Rodgers could have been that, but I think in terms of what the new management structure wants to put in place in terms of leadership, that's when I think the Aaron Rodgers decision to let Aaron Rodgers walk makes the most sense for the Jets. Absolutely.
Do you think, do you believe the reportings that he flew out to Florham Park to try and, I guess, plead with the team to keep him? Do you think that happened? Because there's so many conflicting things back and forth on whether or not that actually happened or not.
I think Aaron Rodgers pleading for something is kind of out of character since his time in Green Bay. So I kind of question that part of the process. I think it's fair to think and to say that Aaron Rodgers wanted to keep playing for the Jets because when he was traded from the Packers to the Jets, he clearly was bought into the idea of winning for the Jets, winning a championship for the Jets, or at least having a strong performance individually for the Jets. Because at this point of his career, I think what Aaron Rodgers wants the most is to build his legacy even more. He's a player that cares a lot about his legacy. So I think being successful with the Jets would have been important for him personally in that regard, in the legacy regard. But I don't think he would plan to play anywhere. I think he would probably want to keep playing for the Jets, but he wouldn't be out of his way to do that, because I think right now the most important thing for him to build his legacy, if it's not for the Jets, it's to win a championship or to compete for a championship. And I think the Jets are not exactly in that position to compete for a championship right now. So I think in that regard, for Rodgers, it would be bad actually to keep playing for the Jets. But yeah, he liked the idea to be competitive and to build something with the Jets, and that's why he opted to be traded to the Jets 2 years ago. So I think it would make sense for him to keep playing there, but ultimately the Jets didn't see the benefits of that.
So, who do you see as the quarterback in 2025? Do you think they go the vet route? Do you think they draft somebody? Do you think it's a combination of both? Where do you see, what direction do you think they're going to go?
I think they have to go both, right? Because see, I don't like Justin Fields as a quarterback. I've seen him closely with the Bears here in the NFC North, so I have some familiarity with his game and with his production. I don't think Justin Fields is exactly a great quarterback, but at some point the Jets have to add a quarterback who can play now with some viability for the future. So I think in that regard, Justin Fields makes sense for the Jets because he would be a viable starter now, and also potentially be a long-term option. But at the same time, if you see how the Lions operated, and I think Aaron Glenn will take some lessons from that. When they traded Matthew Stafford away, they brought in Jared Goff to be that bridge quarterback, because I think that competence level with the veteran starter will give them a baseline to operate and maybe develop a long-term starter thereafter. So I think they'll maybe draft a quarterback this year or maybe next year, but they need a bridge quarterback to give them that level of competence that is important, not only to develop the young quarterback behind him, but also to evaluate everything else. It's truly hard to evaluate, for example, offensive line, the wide receivers when the quarterback is a complete mess. I think the Titans, for example, are going through that process right now. It's basically impossible to evaluate everything else because Will Levis has been so bad. So I think in that regard, they need to they have to go both ways to make that happen.
So do you think they go like a quarterback in the later rounds, like a Howard or a McCord or something in the later rounds? Because I feel like there's more holes on the defensive side of the ball that need to be filled right now, especially after the way we weren't able to stop a nosebleed or anybody running the ball on us. So do you think the quarterback is addressed kind of in the later rounds? Because I worry, and here's what I worry about. You get a veteran quarterback, and he potentially wins you enough games where you may be out of the top market for a quarterback in 2026. That's what I worry about. You know, I would much rather almost keep Tyrod, right? And just let the season go downhill and have a high draft pick. I know players don't tank, but that's where my mind goes. So do you think they get someone in later rounds, or do you see them like trading up, or do you see them like trading up and like trying to get Cam Ward, which all of a sudden is all over the news now that they're trying to move up?
Yeah, I understand your point about maybe getting a guy later, but it's curious how the NFL has operated over the last couple of years, because it's a binary thing with quarterbacks in the draft. You either like the guy or not. So if you see how the draft went down last year, there were, I think, 5 or 6 guys in the first round. I think 6 guys in the first round, and then the next guy was in the 5th round for the Saints. So it's rare. It's rare to see teams drafting players at the quarterback position in the 2nd or 3rd round, because the track record isn't good. And if you have confidence in the guy, you probably will be willing to draft him in the 1st round. So I think in that regard, maybe you have to see who's there, but maybe if Jackson Dart is there when the Jets select, maybe he's an option. I don't think, maybe he's more of a ready-made guy. So I think in that regard, it would make some sense for the Jets too. But if they want a project, maybe the later rounds would make more sense. But then it's a crapshoot, right? Because it's hard to be sure that a 5th round pick will eventually be a starter. So
right.
So with that in mind, I think they'll probably get a guy in the first round if they want to take one with real starting potential, and then sign a free agent maybe to be that bridge quarterback. It's hard because this class is not as strong as last year's class, because Cam Ward is more or less compared to Bo Nix in terms of where they are graded, and Bo Nix was the fifth or sixth guy drafted last
Bo
year.
Nix got to the
So I think
playoffs. So
exactly,
I mean,
exactly. But Mac Jones too, right? So you have to measure those things. Like you have the ceiling, you have the floor. I think Bo Nix had a high floor, which I should say, but the ceiling maybe is not that high. Even though I think his first season was promising in that regard too. But I think the Jets will end up drafting a guy early if they want to, because you have no idea with guys in the fifth or sixth round if they'll be able to start eventually in the NFL, and it's hard to, if the guy has starting potential, it's hard to see them falling so to the later rounds in the draft.
what do you think they do with Devontae? Do you think they try and keep him, or do you think they cut him loose? Because I think also with him and Lazard, I guess I think Lazard's gone. But what Devontae specifically?
Yeah,
What do you think they do?
I think Lazard's gone, and Devontae, it's a tough situation because when the Raiders acquired him, they built the contract for 2025 to be an inflection point, because they gave him a 5-year extension that was 28 million in average per year, but it was
Mhm.
actually a 3-year with a 22 million average per year, and then two kind of fake years to inflate the total average. So with this current cap hit, it's impossible for the Jets to keep him. I don't think it makes sense, and I don't think it's viable for the Jets to pay a wide receiver that's not elite anymore that kind of money. Even though I think Devontae played really well for the Jets late in the season, especially without Aaron Rodgers, I don't think it makes sense. And then if the Jets are not willing to pay that much money for Devontae, then the power goes to Devontae's hand again, because then he'll have the option to say, no, I'm not taking a pay cut, or I'm not willing to play for the Jets under these circumstances. And then the Jets will maybe have to trade him, or maybe to cut him. So I think he'll end up being released, or maybe traded to a team that he wants to go, because then he would have to renegotiate a contract with the new team. I don't see a path for the Jets to keep Devontae. Initially, the path for the Jets to keep Devontae was keeping Aaron Rodgers too, but now that Rodgers is gone, I don't see the Jets keeping Devontae as well.
So, what do you think of the way they handled talking about the cap in general? Okay, did you agree with what they're doing with Rodgers' contract and splitting it over 2 years? Because I thought it would have been better, especially with now it's very likely them getting rid of Devontae, just to eat all that money in 1 year and then have a clean slate for 2026. I know it's a little bit of a different argument now because the cap is going up so much. So it's not that bad of a dead cap hit over 2 years. I think it's 14 million and then 35 million in 26. Would you have rather them
Yeah.
just eat it all in one year, just get rid of everything, including Devontae and Lazard, and then just move on? Or I think, I mean, this is my opinion. I think they did it because they think they can compete in 2025 and they want to find a quarterback. Otherwise, why spread the money out, right?
Yeah, I don't understand that either. I don't like void years. I don't like kicking the can down the road. I'm generally philosophically against it, because I think it usually goes against it. For example, there are extreme cases like the Eagles that are competing for championships, and they are winning championships with void years and stuff. But it's an extreme case. The Jets are starting a rebuild now. It's year zero of the rebuild. So I think it would make more sense I just had to your point, eat everything now to have a clean slate next year. But I also understand the point that it gives you some type of flexibility, because, for example, you can split the dead money through 2 years, and but you can at the same time maybe extend a player now. For example, I think AVT is a prime candidate for an extension, for an early extension. You can put more money, or at least more cap hit early on in the contract, and then give the team more flexibility through the tail end of the contract to have that flexibility, because in the end of the day, at the end of the day, the team and player, they'll plan 3 years in advance. So I think the Jets, they have the cap hit 3 years, the plan for 3 years in advance here, and they can move around money from Aaron Rodgers or from other guys, and it will make a huge difference. What I don't like with that approach is that the Jets will keep Rodgers, even though they can release him, but he will count towards the salary cap and towards the 90-man roster through June because of the June 1st exemption. So the June designation. So they will have the roster spot occupied through June, and they won't have the dead money. They won't have the cap space available for free agency, for example. That's the most important thing. Obviously, they can plan that, but they could have planned that for next year too. So I think the most sensible way for the Jets to handle that would be handle everything at once and have a clean slate next year, because when you're starting to rebuild, it's important to add young talent and cheap talent to the roster. And if you're doing that anyway, the roster will be cheap. So get your money situation right. And we've seen several examples of teams doing that. The Bills did that when they started the rebuild in 2018. They ate a lot of that money, and they cleaned the cap situation. And when the team was ready to compete, they also had money to spend and availability and flexibility to do so. And I think that's something that I would probably do different than the Jets, because that also the thing that I think it matters. The Jets kind of closes the door for a trade, because the Jets could have traded Rodgers. They technically still can trade Rodgers. Maybe if it's a 7th or a late round swap, they could have done that. The new team would possibly restructure the contract with Rodgers, renegotiated that, but when the trade, you can't designate a post June trade. You have to execute the trade after June, which is impossible. So I think the decision to release is part of that consideration.
The one thing I worry about the most with having dead money in 2026 is picking up the 5th-year options of Garrett, of JJ, and of Sauce. Brees, there is no 5th-year option. So I think at the end of the day, Brees may be a candidate that they may not keep going forward, just because of money situations, and the running back position is devalued in general. But I would love for them to keep him. But out of those 4 guys, I don't see them being able to keep all of them. They kind of wasted those guys' young years while being paid very little, with Zach Wilson at quarterback, in my opinion. So that's my biggest gripe with it. I just worry about paying these guys and picking up their 5th-year options coming up. I don't want a situation like they had with Bryce Huff, where they had an opportunity to extend him for kind of cheap, ended up letting him go. Bryce Huff kind of didn't do anything with the Eagles anyway, but I don't want to end up in a situation like that with someone like Garrett. Like Garrett and Sauce have to get re-signed or extended sooner rather than later. Do you agree with that? I mean, JJ, we have to see what his leg is like, but those 2, they have to, right?
Yeah, and this is curious because this is the first season of the 3-year period for the cap floor. The team has to spend at least 90% of the cap of the salary cap in terms of to reach the cap floor. And even though the Jets are not exactly in a comfortable cap situation because of Aaron Rodgers and Davante Adams, they will have dead money, but that dead money doesn't count towards the cap floor because it's cash that matters. So they have to spend over this next 3 seasons. They have to spend. And if you're starting a rebuild, where do you have to spend? With young, talented pieces. And I think those guys, especially Sauce and Garrett Wilson, are the exact type of players that you have to pay. You have to pay them, and there's no way around it. JJ, as I said, it's a complicated matter, and especially because the 5th-year option is now guaranteed, fully guaranteed, 1 year in advance. I lean not to exercise the option, and maybe if he goes back this year and plays well, then you resign him next year, next offseason, or maybe even during the season you can extend his contract. But with Sauce and Garrett Wilson, I would absolutely pick up the option. And even with Brees Hall, you said obviously the running back position is somewhat devalued, but he's so good and still young. You can maybe find a 3 or 36 million extension, for example, something like that. And I think he would take that, and it would be good for the Jets because they need to spend. And if they have to spend, at least spending good young players.
They're in such a catch-22, I feel like, because if they go out and get a veteran quarterback, win some games, then yeah, then you can sell Garrett and Sauce and all these young guys on sticking around. But for like the health of the team and getting a quarterback in 2026, you, in my opinion, you kind of have to tank almost for a year to get that guy. But then you're possibly souring the relationship with those young guys. It's it's going to be difficult. And I mean, I think they're going to get a veteran quarterback. I think they feel like they can compete, and that's why they did that. I mean, they must think that Garrett and Sauce and all of them are just going to be so disenchanted with the team if they tank. In my opinion, that's the one of the
Yeah,
reasons why I think they split the money with Rodgers, so they had something, they could do something in 2025. So, um, last thing.
I agreed
Oh, and,
with that. Sorry, I agreed with that tank strategy a couple of years
mhm,
ago, but I kind of softened my stance in that regard because if you look at teams that tanked, the results in the NFL are truly bad. And it's
mhm.
different from the NBA, for example, when the NBA teams tank and it's everything go right because the turnover
NBA, you get
it's
that one guy,
so
and that
intense.
it's so different. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And in the NFL, I think the cultural impact of losing all the time is more impactful than the upside you have with a higher pick.
Hmm.
And look at the good teams. It's viable to find a good quarterback with a lower draft pick. You know, the Packers that I covered, they drafted Jordan Love at the end of the first round. The Eagles won a Super Bowl with Jalen Hurts that was a second round pick. If you have the correct infrastructure to develop the quarterback, I think this is maybe more important than getting a guy with the first pick. You can see Caleb Williams with the Bears. He's obviously a very talented player, and I think now they're kind of putting the correct infrastructure around him. But if you uh, geography is destiny in the NFL for quarterbacks, especially in terms of development. So you have to build the right infrastructure, and I think this new, uh, I think the Jets' idea with this new leadership structure with Moogie and Glenn is to build first a solid infrastructure, a good culture, and then put a quarterback in place. And I think that's the. I see. We don't know. We're yet to see what they'll do, but I think the plan makes sense there in that regard.
The combine is starting this week. Aaron Glenn and Muji are going down there. Robert Sala, for the years that he was with us, only went down there, I think, once. I think Glenn having a kind of scouting background is really good for the team. But as far as the scouting combine, what guys or positions do you think the Jets are going to really focus in on besides quarterback?
Yeah, I think what the Jets have to do now, because they're starting this process of rebuilding and trying to find foundational pieces, they have to focus on premium positions. Obviously, that
Mm.
includes quarterback, but also edge rushers, cornerbacks, wide receivers. Kind of hard because they already have Garrett Wilson. We have to see what they will do with Devontae. But I think edge rusher, especially and tackle those positions, those true premium positions are important. And I think the fact that Aaron Glenn is trying to be more hands-on with the scouting process and type of
Hmm.
guys they want to bring, I think that's because culture is the most important thing. So obviously, for us as external observers, it's important to see how those guys are physically perform, how fast they are, how athletic they are. But I think Aaron Glenn is more concerned about the character and the culture that he's trying to build. So I think, for example, one guy that I think will be maybe important to interview and see how he goes is Mike Green, the edge defender, because when you watch his tape, it's crazy. The guy is crazy
Mhm.
talented, but there are some rumors that there are off the field issues for him. So I think that's the most important factor for the during the combine for the Jets is try to establish solid relationships. It's for the new general manager to build maybe a closer relationship with agents. Basically, the stuff that we don't see from the outside. Those I think are the most important things for the Jets there this year.
Okay. Thanks for hanging out with me. I appreciate it. We'll definitely have you back on again. Let everybody know where they can find you. What's your handle on Twitter?
Appreciate you a lot, Pat. It's my handle is at Wendell FP. Wendell FP, and you also can follow my work there at A2Z Sports. I obviously cover the Jets. I've been doing a lot of Jet stuff there, and the Packers too. So if you wanna hate the Packers for the Aaron Rodgers beef, you can go there too and follow what I've been writing. Appreciate you a
Awesome.
lot, Pat.
Thanks, man. Thanks for hanging out. We will be back in a few days with another interview, guys. Hit that like and subscribe. Really appreciate it.